With all the new content here in Season 11, it's time to revisit our fundamentals and really dial ourselves in for the second half of the season. What's up guys, it's Valued, and today we're going to take a close look at the best ALC controller settings to help you find success on Stormpoint and World's Edge in Season 11, and really help you guys understand your settings so you can customize your aim to perfectly fit your playstyle. But guys, we've got a lot to talk about, so let's get right into it. So first, we've got to talk about your button layout. These settings will depend heavily on what type of controller you're using. The way you should look at your button layout is you want to have access to all major inputs without having to take your right thumb off of your thumbstick. This is important because you need to be able to aim and perform all of your movement and in-combat actions without having to jeopardize your other inputs. If you're playing on a factory controller without access to any paddles, you want to make sure you're running Button Puncher. This layout will give you access to crouching with your right stick, and in my opinion, it's definitely the way to go. Crouching with the same stick you aim can take some getting used to, but it can really help to smooth out your movement. With so much going on in an Apex game, regardless of your controller, you've got to put a priority on using a button layout that helps you navigate your controls the easiest. An even better option is to get your hands on a controller with paddles. Having even just 2 buttons mapped to paddles can really level up your game, as you can make it so you're rarely ever losing control of that right thumbstick. While having a controller like this is definitely not needed, it can really help you smooth out your gameplay if you feel like you're looking for a more in-depth button layout. Now, believe it or not, the best layout here, in my opinion, is actually to go default if you have paddles, and remap the face buttons to your paddles in order of importance. The 2 biggest in Apex are jump and crouch, and then if you have a controller with 4 paddles, you can throw 2 more inputs on there like reload and swap weapons. With 4 paddles, you'll literally never have to remove your thumb from your aiming stick, and you'll have 100% uptime on all of your inputs. But even with just 2, you're only looking at reload and weapon swap on your face buttons. If you play Claw, you've got that covered, and even if you don't, the 2 remaining hotkeys, reload and weapon swap, both have animations that give you plenty of time to hit shots when they finish. So guys, before we move into ALC and FOV settings, you're clearly here because you want to improve your aim. And there's no better way to get your aim consistent than using AimLab. If you think the firing range is good for warming up, imagine if you could fully customize your training experience and even use specially designed courses from pros. If you're looking to take your aim to the next level after you dial in your ALC settings, then check out the link in the description and play AimLab for free today. Alright guys, so before we get into the nitty gritty of the ALC settings, you've got to make sure you have your FOV where you want it. This is the only setting that we're going to talk about outside of the controller tab, but not only does this affect how much you can see, it also affects your sensitivity. If you dial in your sense and then change your FOV, you'll in turn be changing your sensitivity. So it's important to dial this in first, and for controllers, I recommend staying around 100. Many players play around the 100 mark because it gives them that extra field of vision without making it super tough to spot enemies or hit your shots. And with less precision on a joystick than a mouse, it's important not to make those long-range gunfights too hard on yourself. And when you add in the aim assist doesn't even kick in at range, keeping your FOV at a reasonable number will make aim assist consistent for you as well. Alrighty guys, time to dive into the real meat of today's video, advanced look controls. This is where all the magic happens, as you can customize your sensitivity to the maximum in this menu. Let's go down the list, discuss what each setting in here actually does, and how to adjust it to really find your perfect sense. First up, let's talk dead zones. This setting is extremely important and sets the groundwork for the rest of your sensitivity. This value will adjust how touchy your right stick is, with 0% being as touchy as it gets. The goal here is to find a dead zone just past where your controller has stick drift. Every controller is going to have a bit of drift in its aim if the dead zones are set too low. This is why it's important to test this setting out for yourself, starting at the lowest and working your way up until you notice 0 drifting. Most controllers sit between 3 and 6%, but it's very important that you actually dial in this setting for yourself based on your controller. So for your outer threshold, I recommend leaving it at its default value 2%. This affects where the boundary is for maximum stick movement. It's good to keep this value very small so you get full access to your joystick's range of motion. And for your response curve, this is going to really depend on your preference. This setting can range anywhere between 2 and 10. If you enjoyed playing on linear when you were on default look settings, 2 to 4 is likely going to feel best for you. And if you enjoyed playing classic, something like 8 to 10 is going to feel a lot better for you. This is a setting that you can play around with quite a lot. Just remember, lower value here means more responsive and higher means less responsive. So if you're feeling like your aim is too twitchy, try turning this up a bit, and vice versa if it's feeling a little bit too slow. For your optic settings, this is definitely something that you can adjust, but I'd recommend coming back to this after you dial in the rest of your ALC settings, so that's what we're gonna do. Okay, so now it's time for some more sensitivity talk. These next few settings can be confusing for a lot of people, but they really are pretty straightforward once you understand what it means. Yaw is going to refer to your horizontal or left and right movement, and pitch refers to your vertical or up and down movement. Once you have that down, the rest of these are much less scary sounding, but let's go through each of them so we have a complete understanding of how to dial in your aim. For yaw and pitch speeds, most players like to keep the pitch speed around 75% of their yaw. This gives them a slightly faster horizontal sense and allows it to match up to a lot of the popular default sensitivities like 5.3. If you're a player who likes having their horizontal and vertical sensitivities the same, you can match these values up. One sensitivity in default translates to 50 in yaw or pitch. So if you're on 5.3, the ALC settings would be 250 yaw and 150 pitch. But that's what's great about these settings, is you can customize them even more precisely. For example, when I play controller, I like to play on a yaw of 250 and a pitch of 190. This gives me nearly a 4 vertical sense, but allows me to dial it back just a touch. Alright, so moving on to turning extra yaw and pitch. This setting gives you extra sensitivity when your stick is at max input. This helps to keep your aim tight and precise while in gunfights. But if you need to turn quickly to acquire a target or shoot a player behind you, you get a bit of a bump in sensitivity to help you do it faster. Many players don't use this at all, but if you do, it's important not to go too crazy with these settings, as you want a bit of extra speed, but not something that's going to be hard to control. I'd recommend not going over 100 here and really only use this if you play on a low sensitivity and find it hard to turn quickly in hot situations. Alongside this setting, you have turning ramp up time and ramp up delay. The first is going to indicate how quickly extra yaw and pitch accelerates to its max value. You want this to be somewhere between 10 and 20%, as this will help you smooth out that look acceleration rather than it all kicking in at once. As for ramp up delay, personally I don't like having this on. It gives you a hard time frame it takes for look acceleration to start kicking in, and I'd much prefer it to just be a gradual thing, hence why we're using the ramp up time setting. But if you find that you want look acceleration for turning quickly, but you're struggling with precise aim movements, maybe try putting this setting on at very low values and bumping it up until your aim feels nice and tight and you're happy with the time it takes to ramp up in speed. So once you have your sensitivity at a place you're comfortable with, you can always go back and fine-tune your settings for each optic. This is something you only want to do as a last resort because you don't want to have wacky optic sensitivities and then be trying to change your settings around them. But if you find that 3x feels a little too sluggish when ADSing, or you just can't hit any sniper shots, then play around with raising and lowering these values until you're comfortable. But remember, just do it slowly. Most of these settings shouldn't be tweaked by more than a few tenths of a percent. And lastly, make sure you don't turn either of the last two settings off. Target compensation and melee target compensation are aim assist for your aim and melee respectively. Turning off your aim assist can be a great way to dial in your aim in the firing range, but trust me, you do not want to drop into a game without this feature enabled unless you're doing some actual hardcore training in pubs. Alrighty guys, if you take the time to really dial in your settings with everything we talked about today, your aim is going to be absolutely insane. Now, don't feel like you have to rework your entire sensitivity just because what we talked about today. If you're already on ALC but feel like you're not quite dialed in, just use this video to help guide you towards those minor tweaks that you really need to hone in on. And guys, if you're not on ALC yet, I promise you need to make the switch. You have so much more customization, and finding the right settings is at the foundation of becoming a great player. Anyway guys, as always, it's been your boy Valued, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.